Hello, I'm Paul McBride, and I'm reading a selection from Maxine Hong Kingston's The Woman Warrior, Memoirs of a Girlhood Among Ghosts. Early in the novel, or the memoir really, Maxine explains that the overseas Chinese in the United States, when talking in private, refer to everyone other than the Chinese as ghosts, with one exception. They do not refer to Japanese as ghosts because Japan and China have shared a long and acrimonious relationship. This section of The Woman Warrior deals with Maxine Hong Kingston's mother waiting for the arrival of her 1 year younger sister, whom she has not seen in 30 years. Maxine Hong Kingston's mother, Brave Orchid, had been trained as a surgeon in China in the pre-communist days. And so, when she was about 68 years old, Brave Orchid took the day off to wait at San Francisco International Airport for the plane that was bringing her sister to the United States. She had not seen Moon Orchid for 30 years. She had begun this waiting at home, getting up a half hour before Moon Orchid's plane took off from Hong Kong. Brave Orchid would add her willpower to the forces that keep an airplane up. Her head hurt with the concentration. The plane had to be light. So no matter how tired she felt, she dared not rest her spirit on a wing, but continuously and gently pushed up on the plane's underbelly. She had already been waiting at the airport for 9 hours. She was wakeful. Next to Brave Orchid sat Moon Orchid's only daughter, who was helping her aunt to wait. Brave Orchid had made two of her own children come too because they could drive, but they had been lured away by the magazine racks and the gift shops and the coffee shops. Her American children could not sit for very long. They did not understand sitting. They had wandering feet. She hoped they would get back from the pay TVs or the pay toilets or wherever they were spending their money before the plane arrived. If they did not come back soon, she would go to look for them. And if her son thought that he could hide in the men's room, he was wrong. "Are you all right, Aunt?" asked her niece. "No, this chair hurts me. Help me pull some chairs together so I can put my feet up." She unbundled a blanket, spread it out to make a bed for herself, and on the floor she had two shopping bags full of canned peaches, real peaches, beans wrapped in taro leaves, cookies, thermos bottles, enough food for everybody, though only her niece would eat with her. Her bad boy and bad girl were probably sneaking hamburgers, wasting their money. She would scold them. Many soldiers and sailors sat about, oddly calm, like little boys in cowboy uniforms. She thought that cowboy was what you would call a Boy Scout. They should have been crying hysterically because they were on their way to Vietnam. "If I see one that looks Chinese," she thought, "I'll go over and give him some advice." But she sat up suddenly. She had forgotten about her own son, who even now was in Vietnam. Carefully, she split her attention, beaming half of it to the ocean, into the water, to keep him afloat. He was on a ship. He was in Vietnamese waters. She was sure of it. He and the other children were lying to her. They had said that he was in Japan. Then they said he was in the Philippines. But when she sent him help, she could feel that he was in a ship in Da Nang. Also, she had seen the children hide the envelopes that his letters came in. Do you think my son is in Vietnam? She asked her niece. No, didn't your children say that he was in the Philippines? Have you ever seen any of his letters with Philippine stamps on them? Yes, your children showed me one. Hmm. I wouldn't put it past them to send the letters to some Filipino they know. He puts manila postmarks on them to fool me. Yes, I can imagine them doing that, but don't worry, your son can take care of himself. All your children can take care of themselves. Not him. He's not like other people, not normal at all. He sticks erasers in his ears, and the erasers are still attached to the pencil stubs. The captain will say, "Abandon ship," or "Watch out for bombs," and he won't hear. He doesn't listen to orders. I told him to flee to Canada, but he wouldn't go. She closed her eyes. After a short while, plane and ship under control, she looked again at the children in uniform. Some of the blonde ones looked like baby chicks. Their crew cuts, like the downy yellow on baby chicks. You had to feel sorry for them, even though they were Army and Navy ghosts. Suddenly, her son and daughter came running. "Come, mother, the plane's landed. She's here already." They hurried, folding up her mother's encampment. She was glad that her children were not useless. Brave Orchid pushed to the front of the crowd. She had to be in the front. The passengers were separated from the people waiting for them by glass doors and walls. Immigration ghosts were stamping papers. The travelers crowded along some conveyor belts to have their luggage searched. Brave Orchid did not see her sister anywhere. She stood watching for 4 hours. Her children left and came back. "Why don't you sit down?" they asked. "The chairs are too far away," she said. "Well, why don't you sit on the floor then?" No, she would stand, as her sister was probably standing, in line that she couldn't see from here. Her American children had no feelings, no memory. To while away time, she and her niece talked about the Chinese passengers. These new immigrants, they had it easy. On Ellis Island, the people were thin after 40 days at sea, and they had no fancy luggage. "That one looks like her," Brave Orchid would say. "No, that's not her." Brave Orchid felt her heart leap. "Moon Orchid. There she is," she shouted. But her niece saw that it was not her mother at all, and it shocked her to discover the woman that her aunt was pointing out. This was a young woman, younger than herself, no older than Moon Orchid, the day the sisters had parted. "Moon Orchid will have changed a little, of course," Brave Orchid was saying. "She will have learned how to wear Western clothes." The woman wore a navy blue suit with a bunch of dark, dark cherries on the shoulder. "No, Aunt, that's not my mother." Perhaps not. It's been so many years. "Yes, it's your mother. It must be." "Let her come closer and we can tell. Do you think she's too far away for me to tell? Or is it my eyes getting bad?" "It's too many years gone by," said her niece. Brave Orchid turned suddenly. Another Moon Orchid. This one, a neat little woman with a bun. She was laughing at something a person ahead of her in line said, and Moon Orchid was just like that, laughing at nothing. "I would be able to tell the difference if one of them would only come closer," Brave Orchid said, with tears which she did not wipe. Two children met the woman with the cherries, and she took their hands. The other woman was met by a young man. They looked at each other gladly and then walked away side by side. Up close, neither one of those women looked a bit like Moon Orchid at all. "Don't worry, Aunt," said the niece. "I'll know her." "Well, I'll know her too. I knew her before you did." Finally, Brave Orchid's children quit wandering and drooped on a railing. Who knew what they were thinking? At last, the niece called out, I see her! I see her! Mother! Mother! Whenever the doors parted, she shouted, probably embarrassing her American cousins, but she didn't care. She called out, Mama! Mama! Until the crack in the sliding door became too small to let in her voice. Mama! What a strange word in an adult voice. Many people turned to see what adult was calling Mama like a child. Brave Orchid saw an old woman jerk her head up, her little eyes blinking confusedly. A woman whose nerves leapt toward the sound any time she heard Mama. Then she relaxed to her own business again. She was a tiny lady, very thin, with little fluttering hands, and her hair in a gray knot. She was dressed in a gray wool suit. She wore pearls around her neck and in her earlobes. Moon Orchid would travel with her jewels showing. Brave Orchid momentarily saw, like a larger, younger outline around this old woman, the sister that she had been waiting for. The familiar dim halo faded, leaving the woman so old, so gray. Brave Orchid pressed against the glass. That old lady? Yes, that old lady, facing the ghost who stamped her papers without questioning her, was her sister. Then, without noticing her family, Moon Orchid walked smiling over to the suitcase inspector ghost, who took her boxes apart, pulling out puffs of tissue from where she was. Brave Orchid could not see what her sister had chosen to carry across the ocean. She wished that her sister would look her way. Brave Orchid thought that if she were entering a new country, she would be at the windows, but instead, Moon Orchid hovered over the unwrapping, surprised at each reappearance, as if she were opening presents after a birthday party. Mama, Moon Orchid's daughter kept calling. Brave Orchid said to her children, Why don't you call your aunt too? Maybe she'll hear us if all of you call out together. But the children shrunk away. Maybe that shame face they so often wore was American politeness. Mama, Moon Orchid's daughter called again, and this time her mother looked right at her. She left her bundles in a heap and came running. Hey, said the customs ghost. She went back to clear up her mess, talking inaudibly to her daughter all the while. Her daughter pointed toward Brave Orchid, and at last, Moon Orchid looked at her. Two old women with faces like mirrors. Their hands reached out as if to touch the other's face and then returned to their own, the fingers checking the grooves in the forehead and along the sides of the mouth. Moon Orchid, who never understood the gravity of things, started smiling and laughing, pointing at Brave Orchid. Finally, Moon Orchid gathered up her stuff, strings hanging, papers loose, and met her sister at the door, where they shook hands, oblivious to blocking the way. You're an old woman, said Brave Orchid. Ah, you're an old woman. But you're really old. Surely you can't say that about me. I'm not old the way you're old, but you're really old. You're 1 year older than I am. Your hair is white and your face is all wrinkled. But you're so skinny and you're so fat. Fat women are more beautiful than skinny women. The children pulled them out of the doorway. One of Brave Orchid's children brought the car in from the parking lot, and the other heaved the luggage into the trunk. They put the two old ladies and the niece in the back seat, and all the way home, across the Bay Bridge, over the Diablo Hills, across the San Joaquin River to the valley moon so white at dusk, all the way home, the two sisters exclaimed every time they turned to look at each other, "Ah, how old!" Brave Orchid forgot that she got sick in cars, that all vehicles but palanquins made her dizzy. "You're so old," she kept saying. "How did you get so old?" Brave Orchid had tears in her eyes, but Moon Orchid said, "You look older than I. You are older than I." And again she'd laugh. "You're wearing an old mask just to tease me." It surprised Brave Orchid that after 30 years she could still get annoyed at her sister's silliness. And so they took Moon Orchid and her niece to Brave Orchid's home with her husband and her children, but it quickly became apparent in the days that followed that Moon Orchid had no idea about living in America. Everything puzzled her and confused her and amused her. But Brave Orchid had an important mission. She had to convince Moon Orchid that she had to go claim her husband. Her husband had left her sister 30 years ago and had moved to America, where he now lived in Los Angeles, the same city that Moon Orchid's daughter lived in. And so she said, "You've got to go up and confront your husband because you're the number one wife." And so finally, they decided to leave one Friday. On Friday, Brave Orchid put on her dress up clothes, which she wore only a few times during the year. Moon Orchid wore the same kind of clothes she wore every day, and she was dressed up. Brave Orchid told her oldest son he had to drive. So he drove, and the two old ladies and the niece sat in the back seat. Brave Orchid gave her sister last minute advice for 500 miles. All her possessions had been packed into the trunk. "So we go into your house together?" asked Brave Orchid. "Or do you want to go by yourself?" "Oh, you've got to come with me. I don't know what I would say. I think it would be dramatic for you to go by yourself." He opens the door, and there you are, alive, standing on the porch with all your luggage. "Remember me, you say?" Call him by his own name. He'll faint with shock. Maybe he'll say, "No, go away." But you march right in. You push him aside. And you go in and you sit down in the most important chair and you take off your shoes because you belong. Uh, I'm scared. "Oh, let's turn back. I don't want to see him. Suppose he throws me out." "Oh, he will. He'll throw me out. And you have the right to throw me out, coming here, disturbing him, not waiting for him to invite me. Don't leave me by myself. You can talk louder than I can." "Well, yes, coming with you could be exciting. I can charge through the door and say, 'Where is your wife?' And he'll answer, 'Why, she's right here.' And I'll say, 'This isn't your wife. Where is Moon Orchid? I've come to see her. I'm her first sister. And I've come to see that she is being well taken care of.' And I'll accuse him of murderous things and I'll have him arrested. And you pop up to his rescue. Or I can look at his wife and say, 'Moon Orchid, you've gotten so young.' And he'll say, 'This isn't Moon Orchid.' And you can come in and say, 'No, I am.' And if nobody's home, we'll climb in a window. And when they get back, we'll be at home. You, the hostess, and I, your guest. You'll be serving me cookies and coffee. And then when he comes in, I'll say, 'Well, I see your husband is home. Thank you so much for the visit.'" Sometimes Moon Orchid got in the mood. "Well, maybe I could be folding towels when he comes in. He'll think I'm so clever, and I'll get to them before his wife does." But the further they came down the great Central Valley, the more Moon Orchid wanted to turn back. No, I can't go through with this. She tapped her nephew on the shoulder. Please turn back. You must turn the car around. I should be returning to China. I shouldn't even be here at all. Let's go back. Do you understand me? Don't go back. Brave Orchid ordered her son. Keep going. She can't back out now. What do you want me to do? Make up your mind, said her son, who was getting impatient. Keep going, said Brave Orchid. She's come this far, and we can't waste all this driving. Besides, we have to take your cousin back to her own house in Los Angeles. We have to drive to Los Angeles anyway. Could I go inside to meet my children? We're okay? Okay. All right. Can I go inside to meet my grandchildren? Yes, said her daughter. Well, we'll see them after you straighten out things with your husband, said Brave Orchid. But what if he hits me? I'll hit him. I'll protect you. I'll hit him back. The two of us will knock him down and make him listen. Brave Orchid chuckled as if she were looking forward to a fight. But when she saw how terrified Moon Orchid was, she said, It won't come to a fight. You mustn't start imagining things. We'll simply walk up to the door. If he answers, you'll say, I've decided to come and live with you in the beautiful nation. And if she answers the door, you'll say, You must be little wife. I am big wife. Why, you could even be generous. You could say, I'd like to see our husband, please. I brought my wig, said Brave Orchid. Why don't you disguise yourself as a beautiful lady? I brought lipstick and powder too. And at some dramatic moment, you can pull off the wig and say, I am Moon Orchid. Oh, that's a terrible thing to do. I'd be so scared. I'm so scared. The niece said, I want to be dropped off at my house first. I told my family I'd be home to make lunch. All right, said Brave Orchid, who had tried to talk her niece into confronting her father 5 years ago. But all she had done was to write him a letter telling him that she was in Los Angeles. He could visit her, or she could visit him if he wanted to see her, she had suggested. But he had not wanted to see her. When the car stopped in front of her daughter's house, Moon Orchid asked, May I get out to meet my grandchildren? I told you no, said Brave Orchid. If you do that, you'll stay here, and it'll take us weeks to get up our courage again. Let's save your grandchildren as a reward. You take care of the Chinese matters first. After they left their niece in the suburbs, the son drove them to the address that his mother had given him. It turned out to be a skyscraper in downtown Los Angeles. Don't park in front, said his mother. Find a side street. We've got to take him by surprise. You mustn't let him spot us ahead of time. We have to catch the first look on his face. Moon Orchid said, Yes, I would like to see the look on his face. Brave Orchid's son drove up and down the side streets until he found a parking space that could not be seen from the office building. You have to compose yourself, said Brave Orchid to her sister. You must be calm as you walk in. Oh, this is most dramatic. In broad daylight, in the middle of the city. We'll sit here for a while and look at his building. You think he owns that whole building? Oh, I don't know. Maybe so. Oh, I can't move. My knees are shaking so much I won't even be able to talk. He must have servants and workers in there, and they'll stare at me. I can't bear it. Brave Orchid felt a tiredness drag her down. She had to baby everyone. The traffic was rushing. Los Angeles, noon, hot, and she suddenly felt carsick. No trees, no birds, only city. It must be the long drive, she thought. They had not eaten lunch, and the sitting had tired her out. Movement would strengthen her. She needed movement. I want you to stay here with your aunt, she said to her son. When I come back, we'll work out a plan. She walked around the block. Indeed, she felt that her feet stepping on the earth, even when the earth was covered with concrete, gained strength from it. She breathed health from the air, even though it was full of gasoline fumes. The bottom floor of the building housed several stores, and Brave Orchid rushed along beside her reflection in the glass. She used to be young and fast. She still was fast, and she felt young. It was mirrors, not aches and pains, that turned a person old, everywhere showing white hair and wrinkles. The building was a fine one. The lobby was chrome and glass, with ashtray stands and plastic couches arranged in semicircles. She waited for the elevator to fill before she got in because she didn't want to operate new machinery by herself. Once on the sixth floor, she searched alertly for the number in her address book. How clean the building was! The restrooms were locked, and there were square lights overhead. She entered the office, glad that it was a public place and she needn't knock. A room full of men and women looked up from their magazines. She could tell by their eagerness for change that this was a waiting room. Beside a sliding glass partition sat a young woman in a modern nurse's uniform. Not a white one, but light blue pantsuit with white trim. Hello, may I help you? Said the receptionist, parting the glass. Brave Orchid hesitated, and the receptionist took this to mean that she could not speak English. Just a moment, she said, and went into the inner room, and she brought back another woman who wore a similar uniform, except that it was pink and trimmed in white. The woman's hair was gathered up into a bunch of curls at the back of her head. Some of the curls were fake. She wore round glasses and false eyelashes, which gave her an American look. Have you an appointment? She asked in poor Chinese. She spoke less like Chinese than Brave Orchid's own children. My husband, the doctor, usually does not take drop in patients, she said. We're booked up for about a month. Brave Orchid stared at her pink painted fingernails, gesticulating, and thought she probably would not have given out so much information if she weren't so clumsy with language. I have the flu, said Brave Orchid. Well, perhaps we can give you the name of another doctor, said this woman, who was her sister in law. This doctor is a brain surgeon. He doesn't work with flu. Actually, she said, this doctor cuts brains. A child making up words as she went along. Brave Orchid, who had been a surgeon too, thought that her brother in law must be a clever man. She herself could not practice openly in the United States because the training here was so difficult and because she could never learn English. Brave Orchid back in China had gone to medical school and learned to be a surgeon, but she actually worked as a midwife. And there's a great deal in the novel about her mother's midwifery back in China. He was smart enough to learn ghost ways. She would have to be clever to outwit him. She needed to retreat and plan some more. Oh, I'll go to another doctor then, she said, and left. She needed a new plan to get her sister and brother in law together. This nurse wife was so young, and the office was so rich with food, with wood, paintings, and fancy telephones that Brave Orchid knew that it wasn't because he couldn't get the fare that he hadn't sent his for his old wife. He had abandoned her for this modern, heartless girl. Brave Orchid wondered if the girl knew that her husband had a Chinese wife. Perhaps she should ask her. But no, she mustn't spoil the surprise by giving in any hints. She had to get away before he came out into the corridor, perhaps to go to one of the locked restrooms. As she walked back to her sister, she noted corners and passageways and broom closets and other offices, ambush spots. Her sister could crouch behind a drinking fountain and wait for him to get thirsty and waylay him. I met his second wife, she said, opening the car door. What's she like? Asked Moon Orchid. Is she pretty? She's very pretty and very young, just a girl. She's his nurse. He's a doctor like me. What a terrible, faithless man. You'll have to scold him for years. But first, you need to sit up straight. Use my powder. Be as pretty as you can, otherwise, you won't be able to compete. You do have one advantage, however. Notice he has her be his worker. She's like a servant, so there's room for you to be his wife. She works at the office and you work at the house. That's almost as good as having two houses. On the other hand, a man's real partner is the hardest worker. You couldn't learn nursing, could you? No, I guess not. It's almost as difficult as doing laundry. What a petty man he turned out to be, giving up responsibility for a pretty face. Brave Orchid reached for the handle. Are you ready? For for what? Well, to go up there, of course. We're at his office, and I think we ought to be very direct. There aren't any trees to hide you, no grass to soften your steps, so you walk right into his office and you make an announcement to the patients and the fancy nurses. You say, I am the doctor's wife, and I'm going to see my husband. And then you step into the inner door and enter. Don't knock on any doors. Don't listen if the minor wife talks to you. You walk right past her without changing pace. And when you see him, you say, surprise. You say, who is that woman out there? She claims to be your wife. That will give him a chance to deny her on the spot. I'm so scared. I can't move. I can't do that in front of all those people like a stage show. I won't be able to talk. And sure enough, Moon Orchid's voice was fading into a whisper. She was shivering and small in the corner of the seat. So, a new plan then, said Brave Orchid, looking at her son, who had his forehead on the steering wheel. You, she said, I want you to go up to his office and tell your uncle that there's been an accident out here in the street. A woman's leg has been broken and she's crying in pain. He'll have to come. You bring him to the car. Mother. Mused Brave Orchid. Maybe we ought to put your aunt in the middle of the street and she can lie down with her leg bent under her. But Moon Orchid kept shaking her head in trembling no's. Well, why don't you push her down in the intersection and pour ketchup on her, and I'll run over her a little bit, said the son. Stop being silly, she said. You Americans don't take life seriously. Mother, this is ridiculous. The whole thing's ridiculous. Go, do what I tell you. I think your schemes will be useless, Mother. What do you know about Chinese business? She said. Do as I say. Don't let him bring the nurse, said Moon Orchid. Don't you want to see what she looks like? Asked Brave Orchid. Then you'll know what he's giving up for you? No. No, she's none of my business. She's unimportant. Speak English, Brave Orchid told her son. Then he'll feel he has to come with you. And she pushed her son out of the car. I don't want to do this, he said. You'll ruin your aunt's life if you don't. You can't understand business begun in China. Just do what I say. Go. Slamming the car door behind him, he left. Moon Orchid was groaning now and holding her stomach. Straighten up, said Brave Orchid. He'll be here any moment. But this only made Moon Orchid groan louder, and tears seeped between her closed eyelids. But you want a husband, don't you? Said Brave Orchid. If you don't claim him now, you'll never have a husband. Stop crying, she ordered. Do you want him to see you with your eyes and nose swollen when that young so called wife wears lipstick and nail polish like a movie star? Moon Orchid managed to sit upright, but she seemed stiff and frozen. In the rearview mirror, Brave Orchid saw her son come running, his uncle after him with a black bag in his hand. Faster, faster, her son was saying. He opened the car door. Here she is, he said to his uncle. I'll see you later. And he ran on down the street. The two old ladies saw a man, authoritative, in his dark western suit, start to fill the front of the car. He had black hair and no wrinkles. He looked and smelled like an American. Suddenly, the two women remembered that in China, families often married young boys to older girls who babysat their husbands their whole lives. Either that, or in this ghost country, a man could somehow keep his youth. Where's the accident? He said in Chinese. What is this? You don't have a broken leg. Neither woman spoke. Brave Orchid held her words back. Would not let herself interfere with this meeting after so long an absence. What is it? He asked. What's wrong? These women had such awful faces. What is it, grandmothers? Grandmothers? Brave Orchid shouted. This is your wife, and I'm your sister in law. Moon Orchid started to whimper. Her husband looked at her and recognized her. You, he said, what are you doing here? But all she did was open and shut her mouth without any words coming out. Why are you here? He asked, eyes wide. Moon Orchid covered her face with one hand and motioned no with the other. Brave Orchid could not keep silent. Obviously, he was not glad to see his wife. I sent for her, she burst out. I got her name on the Red Cross list. I sent her a plane ticket. I wrote her every day and gave her the heart to come. I told her how welcome she would be, how her family would welcome her, how her husband would welcome her. I did what you, the husband, had time to do in these last 30 years. He looked directly at Moon Orchid, the way savages looked, looking for lies. What do you want? He asked. She shrank from his stare, but it silenced her crying. You weren't supposed to come here, he said, the front seat a barrier against the two women over whom a spell of old age had been cast. It's a mistake for you to be here. You can't belong. You don't have the hardness for this country. I have a new life. What, what about me? Whispered Moon Orchid. Good, thought Brave Orchid. Well said. I have a new wife, said the man. She's only your second wife, said Brave Orchid. This is your real wife. In this country, a man may have just one wife. So you'll get rid of that creature in your office? Asked Brave Orchid. He looked at Moon Orchid. Again, the rude American eyes. You go live with your daughter. I'll mail you the money I've always sent you. I could get arrested if the Americans knew about you. I'm living like an American. He talked like a child born here. How could you ruin her old age? Said Brave Orchid. She has food. She has servants. Her daughter went to college. There wasn't anything she thought of that she couldn't buy. I've been a good husband. But you made her live like a widow. That's not true. Obviously, the villagers haven't stoned her. She's not wearing mourning. The family didn't send her away to work. Look at her. She'd never fit into an American household. I have important American guests who come inside my house to eat. He turned to Moon Orchid. You can't talk to them. You can barely talk to me. Moon Orchid was so ashamed. She held her hands over her face. She wished she could also hide her dappled hands. Her husband looked like one of the ghosts passing the car windows, and she must look like a ghost from China. They had indeed entered the land of ghosts, and they had become ghosts. Do you want her to go back to China then? Brave Orchid asked. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. She may stay, but I do not want her in my house. She has to live with you or with her daughter. I don't want either of you coming here. Notice that he refers to his daughter as your daughter. Suddenly, his nurse was tapping on the glass so quickly that they might have missed it. He gestured to the old woman, holding a finger to his mouth. Just a moment. He had never told his American wife that he had a wife in China, and they mustn't tell her either. What's happening? She asked. Do you need help? The appointments are piling up. No, no, he said. This woman fainted in the street. I'll be up soon. They spoke to each other in English. The two old women did not call out to the young woman. Soon she left. I'm leaving now, too, said the husband. Why didn't you write and tell her once and for all that you weren't coming back and you weren't sending for her? I don't know, he said. It's as if I had turned into a different person. The new life around me was so complete, it pulled me away. You became people in a book that I had read a long time ago. Well, the least you can do, said Brave Orchid, is invite us to lunch. Aren't you inviting us to lunch? Don't you owe us a lunch at a good restaurant? She would not let him off easily. So he bought them lunch. When Brave Orchid's son came back to the car, he had to wait for them. Moon Orchid was driven back to her daughter's house, but though she lived in Los Angeles, she never saw her husband again. Brave Orchid and her son drove back north. Brave Orchid sitting in the back seat the whole way.